Hey guys, it's me again. I just want to bring you a little encouraging word today. And this message is just as much for you as it is for me. I keep having to tell myself the same thing. Um, but, a lot of times God puts mountains in our way just to test our faith and to see if we will be reliant on Him. I've been, my family and I have been facing some serious mountains lately, and one of the mountains has been moved. Praise God. We're just waiting for the other ones to crumble now. Um, but you know, this message is encouraging. And I mean this to encourage you as much as myself. Um, Pardon my dog; she's kind of special. Um, but over here in Matthew 17, the disciples were trying to cast out a demon of this man, or this man's son, I'm sorry. And, they tried and they tried, the disciples tried to cast him out, and they couldn't. So they brought him to Jesus. And they said, God, Jesus, why can't we cast this demon out? And Jesus said unto them in verse 20, it says, and Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief, verily I say unto you, if ye have faith, the grain as a grain of a mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. And I'm no farmer, and I'm not really sure what a mustard seed is, but seeds are small. And if you have that kind of faith, and it's not talking about physical mountains, although I'm sure, it could be done. But these are the mountains in our lives that he's talking about. It says, howbeit this kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting. So you've got to do some prayer. You got to do some time on your knees. You got to do some fasting for these things. But God likes to work in the impossible. He likes to go behind the eight ball, if you will. He likes to work when there's no other options. When you've exhausted all other options, he likes to shine. He likes to come through and says, "That's me. I did that." So we're going to look over here in 1 Samuel 17. We all know this story by heart. Pardon me, I'm still getting over this crud. But this story is about David and Goliath. It's in 1 Samuel 17. And, over here in verses 4 and 5, it tells you just how big Goliath was. And there went out a champion. This is verse 4. And there went out a champion of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And I got on Chat GPT and just asked just how big that was. And they said it's roughly 9'9" to 10 feet. So he's a big dude, right? And it says, and he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. So this, I looked that up too, and the just his chest plate or whatever was 125 pounds. So this guy's pretty big, pretty strong to heft us around. And verse 6, it says, and he had greaves of brass upon his leg, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was as a weaver's beam, which is about 4 to 6 feet, by the reconstruction of the looms or whatever back then. So it's about 3 or 4 inches thick, and 4 to 6 feet. And the spearhead alone weighed 600 shekels of iron, and that was, what was it, 15 pounds. So if you could chuck this thing, you're a pretty hefty guy, right? So, we know the story. He comes out and uh, he's taunting the Israelites. He says, come on, send somebody to fight with me, and uh, over here in verse 8, it says, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then ye shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. So, we know David, the little shepherd boy, the least of 8 sons, the youngest, he comes out and he hears this. And what is it, verse 11, but it says, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So he scared these people. But David shows up, and he comes down and he sees what's going on, and he hears, Goliath's threats and his defiance towards God and Israel and all this. And the taunting goes on for 40 days. It says, and the Philistine drew near morning and evenings, day and night, and presented himself for 40 days. So this goes on for quite some time. And David's father, Jesse, tells him, go take some cheese and bread to your brothers on the battle line. And it says, and David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight and shouted for the battle. David left his flock and everything, and then his brothers get upset. They're like, dude, why'd you come down here? Why are you meddling in these affairs? You just came down because you have nothing to do. And David was like, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? Over here in verse 23, it says, and he talked with them, and behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, have ye seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up, and it shall be that the man who killeth him, and the king who will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. So, David's like, what's going to be done about this? So, in verse 28 through 31, that's when his brothers were like, you're just meddling around, what are you doing here? So, David goes to Saul and it's like, dude, I'll fight this guy. And in verse 32, it says, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Don't be afraid of this guy. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. So he's like, you can't take this guy. You're small, you're ruddy. You can't face this dude. And David said unto Saul, says, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. So, David's had enough of this. He's like, a lion and a bear and tigers, oh my, a Philistine is no big problem. So Saul takes his armor, puts it on him, and says, here, go fight him, And David tries it on. He's like, dude, I don't need this stuff. And so he goes down to the creek, picks up 5 smooth stones, sticks it in his bag, and takes his sling with him. And then in verse 41, it says, and the Philistine came and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. So, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy and of fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. So he called him out, cursed him by God. And the Philistine said unto David, come unto me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. He's calling him a chicken. And then he says, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. So this guy's, he's got his armor bearer, he's got his sword and his shield and all this. David's like, you come to me with all this stuff, I come to you with one thing, and that's the name of God. And he says, this day will the Lord deliver thee into my hands, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, and that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. So we know he takes a sling, chucks it, sinks it into his forehead, kills the guy, cuts his head off, So, the moral of that story is, you don't need all this stuff to fight. All you need is God on your side. Don't tell God how big your giant is. Tell the giant how big your God is. So, that's one impossible story, that God showed up, because in the physical realm, this little 15-year-old kid couldn't take on a 10-foot giant, but that one stone that he threw slung at the giant's head, completely killed him. And that was just one instance where God showed up in the impossible. We're gonna look back here with the story of the children of Israel with the Egyptians as they were being led out of the land of Egypt, and it says they were camped out. This is Exodus 14. They're camped out by the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army comes and surrounds them, and over here in verse 10, it says, and when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. they weren't grateful that God sent a man to deliver them, and now the Egyptians are surrounding them. They're getting ready to kill them, and uh, God saves them. In verse 21, it says that Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And it says, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and they took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel. They were scared of it, the Israelites, by this time. For the Lord fighteth against them, or fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. So, another impossible situation. These guys were surrounded. They were being chased. God says to Moses, stretch out your hand. It's part of the Red Sea. So they get across, and the Egyptians perish, So, once again, their backs were against the wall, and God showed up and saved them. We're going to look back even further for our next one, to Genesis 17, when God promises Abraham a son. Give me a second here. I didn't have this one marked. In verse 1 of 17, it says, when Abram was 90 years old and 9, so he was 99 years old, the Lord appeared unto Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect, and I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be called Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. So, God's telling Abraham that, you may be 100 years old, but I'm going to make you a father. And, Abraham, where was it at? In 15, it says, and God said unto Abraham, as for Sarai, thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name, and I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. And then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? He's like, this is impossible, God. I can't do, this is not physically possible for me to have a son at this age. And God says, you're wrong. And over here in chapter 18, he gets 3 visitors, and that they're telling him that, they're going to be parents. And they get the visitors, and then verses 11 through 15, it says, Now Abraham and Sarah were old, and were well stricken in their age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? So the Lord answered unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? And then verse 14, it really draws it in. It says, Is there anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. And we all know what happens after that. But, verse 14 really drives that point home. It says, is there anything too hard for God to do? It may seem impossible in man's terms, in man's eyes, but with God, nothing is impossible. The birth of Christ, even, a virgin birth is unheard of. We know physics, how things work and everything. How are you supposed to have a child, being a virgin? But, it happened, and he is the Son of God. I'm just going to leave you with this verse. Matthew 19:26. It says, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Don't write him out. Don't sell him short, because he's there waiting for you to call out to him. And he likes to put us in those situations to see if we will believe in that. And, it's an encouraging passage, a message for me. And I want to encourage you guys as well. That's about all I've got for that one. Love you guys. I mean it. Hope you have a good day.